Hi, everyone, and welcome to the current affairs brought to you by the Oyster Academy. This current affair would be for the week from 26th of October to 1st of November, and this will specifically pertain to human resource development and human rights. The rest of the current affairs, we might have another section coming up soon, but this weekly current affairs would be specifically for HRD and HR. Let's look at a few updates that have come up in this particular week. The first one is Pradhanmantri Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, in which Uttar Pradesh government has actually secured the first rank, and they have been able to give out the highest number of loans under the scheme. What we need to take away from here is one, remember that Uttar Pradesh is doing really well when it comes to loans, and second is the fact that we also need to understand what is PM Swanidhi. अगर नाम ही देख लो तो स्ट्रीट वेंडर है. स्ट्रीट वेंडर यानी जो ठेले वाले हैं, जो रास्ते पे कुछ गुड्स बेचते हैं, वो है स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स. सो दिस विल बी अ पर्टिकुलर स्कीम स्पेसिफिकली फॉर स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स. उनको आत्मनिर्भर बनाना है. एंड देयर इज गोइंग टू बी अ निधि फॉर दिस. निधि का मतलब है फंड, यानी एक प्रॉपर फंड दिया जाएगा स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स के लिए लोन के द्वारा, एंड विच दे विल बी एबल टू रीस्टार्ट देयर वर्क. दैट इज व्हाट पीएम स्वनिधि आइडियली और ऑफिशियली ट्राइज टू एम एट. We will be looking at the smaller aspects of it, ताकि अगर आपने इसके पहले स्वनिधि के बारे में पढ़ा नहीं हो या जानते नहीं हो तो यहाँ पे हो जाएगा. ठीक है. So the first update is going to be that Uttar Pradesh government has secured first rank in giving out loans. Now, what is Swanidhi and what does it really mean? इसका full form देखिए, Prime Minister Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, इसलिए स्वनिधि. This was launched by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs on 1st of June 2020. So your start date is 1st of June 2020 and launched by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. If it is by this particular ministry, that means this scheme is going to be only in the urban areas. Okay? यानी जो final implementation है ये scheme का, ये urban areas के लिए है. But the people who would be getting loans under this scheme can be living in urban areas or could be living in, let's say, peri-urban areas or even from rural areas. We do not care as to where they live, where they work, या फिर ये scheme कहाँ पे implement होती है, वो urban areas में होना है. That is why this is supposedly to be done by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Okay, that is one. तीसरी बात है कि लोन दे रहे हैं. अच्छा, कितना लोन देंगे? कोलैटरल फ्री वर्किंग कैपिटल लोन्स ऑफ अप टू 10,000 रुपीज. ओके, कोलैटरल फ्री है. कोलैटरल मतलब जब आप लोन लेते हो ना, देयर इज समथिंग दैट यू नीड टू कीप विद द बैंक स्टेटिंग कि अगर इफ आई एम नॉट एबल टू रीपे यू, यू टेक अवे माय होम और समथिंग लाइक दैट. दैट इज अ कोलैटरल. यहाँ पे कोलैटरल फ्री देंगे, यानी वेरी क्लोज टू बीइंग अ पर्सनल लोन. इट इज वेरी मच अ पर्सनल लोन इटसेल्फ. कितने का लोन है ये? 10,000 रुपीज का लोन आएगा टोटल. And what is the tenure? 1 year. That means this 10,000 rupees has to be repaid back with interest within 1 year. And that is what these street vendors have to do. And they would get this 10,000 rupees. And they can restart their business. अभी हुआ ऐसा है कि कोविड के बीच में जब लॉकडाउन था and the entire pandemic and even people are still not out, the street vendors have been hit very badly because ये जो लोग हैं ये आज अगर कुछ बेचा तो खाएंगे वरना भूखे सोना पड़ेगा. That is the state of most of the street vendors out there, and it has been really bad for them. So the government said कि to kickstart this biggest non-formal economy that we have, especially in urban areas, we have to start giving them loans. Now the question arises is who is giving the loans? Is it the banks or is it the government directly? गवर्नमेंट ने ये स्कीम तो बनाई है, ठीक है. गवर्नमेंट ने स्कीम बनाने के बाद ये जो पे आउट जो होता है ना 10,000 रुपीज का, ये बैंक्स देती है. गवर्नमेंट खुद बैठ के मोदी जी वहां पे आपके डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर अकाउंट में पैसे नहीं भेजने वाले, ठीक है. ये बैंक्स के थ्रू करना पड़ता है. दैट मींस यू नीड टू गिव आउट प्रॉपर डॉक्यूमेंट्स एज वेल. यू आल्सो नीड टू पे अ सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, एंड देन वंस यू finish with your EMIs and all, you can continue with whatever business you have or so. बट ये जो रीफाइनेंस अगर करना पड़ा, लेट्स से बैंक गिव्स यू सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ मनी, लेट्स से 10,000 रुपीज जैसे स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स को दिया गया है इस बार, एंड द वेंडर इज नॉट एबल टू रीपे द बैंक बैक, then there is going to be a small fund kept by the government which will be kept aside, which would be given to the banks if at any point of time we need to repay the banks also. अच्छा, इतना ही नहीं है, but we are going to give certain incentives to these street vendors where there would be a little form of interest subvention schemes, and there would also be incentives if they are paying their money on time and if they are taking digital transactions. So there will be a small amount of fund also for that. अब ये सब गवर्नमेंट अलग से पैसे रख रही है इसके लिए. So what is happening is स्वनिधि स्कीम एक बार फिर से, this is the full form is going to be Prime Minister Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi. This was launched by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs on 1st of June 2020. Collateral free working capital of up to 10,000 rupees and 1 year का tenure. ठीक है, 1 year tenure म्हणजे 12 हफ्त्यात त्यांना ते परत पैसे करायचे. Yeah, so the basic aim is to empower street vendors, not only extending loans to them, but also for their holistic development and economic upliftment. These words are very important: holistic development and economic upliftment. This is what the government is actually trying to aim for. And how many street vendors are we going to help? A total of 50 lakh street vendors is our target as such. Now, the question that you should really ask is, how did we come up with this number of 50 lakh street vendors? ये सच में उतने हैं भी या ये उससे ज़्यादा भी है? And how are we going to come to the fact कि किस street vendor को हमने loan देना है? Because this is another point that you need to sort of look at. All right, so let's look at the eligibility criteria for you to get a loan under Swanidhi scheme, that is for a street vendor. The first is that the street vendor should be in possession of certificate of vending. अभी एक चीज याद रखिएगा, ये जो लोग बैठते हैं ना street vending करने के लिए, ये ठेले वाले जो होते हैं, they are given identity cards as well, and they also have certificates stating that they can become street vendors and they are legally allowed to sell on that particular street. So there might be a possibility that there could be people who do not have this license as such. So it could also mean a few things. एक तो हमने जो सर्वे करवाया है कि वो स्ट्रीट वेंडर कौन है, 50 लाख जो स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स हमने चुने हैं या फिर देना है इन ये स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स को, और एटलीस्ट our target is such that we need to look at least giving money to 50 lakh street vendors. We have done a quick survey, and in that survey we tried to find out how many people really have the certificate of vending. Once you do have the certificate of vending, you would be eligible for this. If you do not have the certificate of vending, you can get a letter of recommendation from the urban local body that you are street vending in. तो चलो समझो आप पुणे की किसी स्ट्रीट पे स्ट्रीट वेंडिंग कर रहे हो, तो पुणे म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन से एक लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन लाना है stating that you are vending on this particular street but you do not have the certificate of vending for whatever be the reason, and you, or maybe you did not get the certificate as such, but you had applied for it. Second, these street vendors also have associations. So you could have association for vegetable vendors, pani puri wala, ये सब association बना के बैठते हैं लोग, ठीक है? तो ये association के आप member हो, ये भी दिखा दो, आप eligible हो सकते हो. इसके अलावा you will also have to give out your Aadhaar card, your PAN card or driving license के details वगैरह, ऐसा KYC documentation देना है to the bank, and then they would give you this particular Swanidhi scheme if you fit in all the category that they require. So eligibility ये है, you need to have a possession of certificate of vending. The next important point under Swanidhi scheme is that you will be getting incentives for regular repayment of loans, and also we would be rewarding digital transactions. The government is trying to push for digital transactions over here. So not only would there be less spread of COVID, because it could be that the notes itself might be carrying the virus and it might go from one person to another person via touch, but to avoid that as well, and to also improve digital transactions. अगर digital transactions हो रहे हैं directly account में पैसे जा रहे हैं, ठीक है, so government को भी ध्यान रख सकते हैं या फिर बैंक भी ध्यान रख सकती है कि भाई सच में कितने transactions हो रहे हैं. और स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स अगर रहे तो डिरेक्टली जर का अकाउंट मध्ये पडत असतील पैसे तर इमिडिएटली सगळे पैसे काढले जात नाहीत किंवा कॅश तर वापरली जात नाही लगेच. सो दीज आर द फ्यू थिंग्स दॅट वुड इन्सेंटिवाइज ग्रोइंग ऑफ द स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स एंड ऑल्सो सेविंग ऑफ द स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स. सो ये दो चीजें हम लोग पुश करेंगे, रेगुलर रीपेमेंट एंड डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शंस. So what are we doing over here? We'll give out an interest subsidy of 7%, which will be a quarterly payout. यानी every 3 months के बाद आपको 7% interest आपको फिर से मिल जाएगा. अभी इसका interest है कितना? Now this is going to be very close to being a personal loan, and most of the commercial banks as such, what they do is personal loans are anywhere between 21 to 24% or so. So the example that the government themselves have given regarding the Swanidhi scheme is at an interest rate of 24%. So you could come to a conclusion that most of these banks, or even let's say RRBs or cooperative banks and non-banking financial institutions, they would be charging a 24% interest rate on this. 10,000 rupees on a yearly basis at 24%, इसका EMI तकरीबन 945 rupees तक आता है. Okay, and this is at 24%. So after every 3 months, ये 24% का 7% जो आएगा, यानी 7% इंटरेस्ट रेट 3 महीने का, वो गवर्नमेंट डायरेक्टली डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर द्वारा आपके अकाउंट में ऐड कर दी, and only if you are paying out regularly. Apart from this, if you have about, let's say, 200 digital transactions in a month, you would also get an added cashback from the government of 100 rupees or so. ठीक है, यानी अगर आपने पेटीएम से 200 ट्रांजैक्शन कर दिए, या फिर गूगल पे से कर दिए, या फिर पेटीएम गूगल पे मिला के आपके 200 ट्रांजैक्शंस महीने के हो गए, तो आपको 100 रुपए मिल जाएंगे. Now, I also understand that 200 transactions in an entire month is a huge number, and it is not going to be possible, especially for street vendors. अभी आपने पानी पूरी खा ली तो 30 रुपए का शायद कर लेंगे लोग, कभी कभार कर लेते हैं, पर अगर कुछ 10 रुपए का छोटा मोटा हुआ तो फिर लोग 10 rupees they just pay off and they move on. So there might not be as many digital transactions with street vendors as compared to maybe shops as such. So what the government has done is they have said that 200 transactions अगर रहेंगे तो 100 rupees देंगे, पर अगर 100 transactions आपने कर दिए तो हम आपको 75 rupees देंगे, और 50 transactions कर दिए तो हम आपको 50 rupees देंगे. Now 50 transactions in an entire month is definitely possible. So 100 रुपए नहीं तो at least 50 rupees तो आ गए महीने के extra cashback. So calculating all of this with an interest subsidy and digital transactions, the amount that you get back, the street vendors, अगर आपने कैलकुलेट किया ठीक से, तो इंटरेस्ट अगर 24% भी रहा तो भी वो पूरा का पूरा इंटरेस्ट इन टर्म्स विद इंसेंटिव्स एंड दिस रीपेमेंट ऑफ 7% ऑफ क्वार्टरली पे आउट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, दे ओवरऑल देखा तो कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं लगता है वैसे. नाउ दिस इज गोइंग टू बी अ वेरी बिग बेनिफिट फॉर आवर स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स एज सच, फॉर ऑल दोज हु आर एलिजिबल फॉर इट. सो वो हिसाब से काफी अच्छा कर रहा है. अच्छा, कौन से बैंक्स दे सकते हैं? यू हैव योर शेड्यूल्ड कमर्शियल बैंक्स, यू हैव रीजनल रूरल बैंक्स, small finance banks, cooperative banks, non-banking finance companies, microfinance institutions, and even self-help groups would be allowed. Now, if a street vendor does it through cooperative banks or even some of the other, even microfinance or so, there is a very high possibility that he could have these daily collections done. So क्या होता है कि ये बंदा बैंक, कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स में ऐसा होता है. सो कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स का बंदा आएगा, एंड डेली कलेक्शन वाले भी होते हैं अलग से. यू कैन पुट इन 100 rupees ऑन अ डेली कलेक्शन. सो कैश लेके जाएगा 100 रुपए का दिन का, एंड देन यू एंड अप सेविंग 3,000 rupees अ मंथ. उसमें से EMIs इमीडिएटली निकल सकते हैं अलग से, बिकॉज योर EMI इज गोइंग टू बी अबाउट 945 rupees और सो एट 24% फॉर 10,000 rupees in a year. So it becomes a very good incentive for street vendors to go through the Swanidhi scheme, and Uttar Pradesh is doing a very good job giving out the maximum number of loans. Now the only issue is that these street vendors should be able to repay it back, and there should also be a stress on proper precautions, especially to avoid COVID transmission. So this is something that is happening with Swanidhi scheme. The next update is World Polio Day. Now, World Polio Day is celebrated every year on 24th of October, and this day is actually observed to make various countries to stay focused on vigilant fight against polio. Now, 24th of October ही क्यों celebrate होता है? 24th of October is the birthday of Jonas Salk, who led actually the first team to develop the vaccine against polio. And इस बार का थीम है a win against polio is a win for global health. So this is something that we are doing. 24th of October is celebrated as the World Polio Day. Now the question arises as to where does India stand when it comes to polio. पोलियो का एक चीज याद रखिएगा, there are 3 types of strains. One is your P1, P2 and P3. ठीक है, 3 टाइप के strains होते हैं, and हम लोग जो वैक्सीन देते हैं ना, ये तीनों टाइप के strains के लिए देते हैं. So P1, P2 and P3. But this small table that you notice over here, this table shows the date of last reported case that we had for polio. Now P2 का अगर strain देखा आपने 24th of October 1999, मुझे तकरीबन 21 साल पहले तक कुछ हुआ था ये केस. P1 is 13 January 2011 when we had the last reported case, And P3, the last reported case was 22nd of October 2010. So it has been about 10 years or 9 years at least since the last known wild polio case. Now, when I say wild strain, iska matlab this strain is not a vaccine-induced strain. That means one that is found in nature, wild polio strain. कभी कभी ऐसा भी होता है कि the vaccine that we provide to these young kids to fight against polio, these vaccines are nothing but weakened viruses. It could also happen that the baby is not strong enough and the vaccine turns around for the child, and then unfortunately the child has polio because of the vaccine, where the body is not able to fight the weakened virus itself. Now, such cases are there in India, which are very, very rare. However, they are still there. And these are vaccine-induced cases. अभी ये calculate नहीं होते by WHO. Okay, these are unfortunate cases that happened because of prevention of polio. जो wild cases है वो अलग है completely. वो इंडिया में पिछले 10 साल से हुए नहीं हैं. And that is why India on 24th of February 2012 was declared as wild polio virus transmission free. And this was a huge achievement for India, considering that we had taken huge care and also a huge advertisement initiative. Apart from that, we were making a lot of vaccines. We were making people aware of the fact that polio is such a deadly disease and it can be prevented. So वो पूरा strategy काफी अच्छा हुआ अपने लिए. And we finally eradicated polio, and it was declared on 24th of February 2012 that we are polio free. Subsequently, on 27th March 2014, India, along with 10 other members of Southeast Asia region, was declared polio-free by the Regional Certification Commission (RCC) of WHO. So, अभी सिर्फ unfortunately Afghanistan और Pakistan ही बाकी है, and which need to go polio-free. Okay. So when it comes to World Polio Day, GPE, EI had recommended that we actually switch from a trivalent oral polio vaccine to a bivalent oral polio vaccine. इसका benefit क्या है? Trivalent oral polio vaccine is where we would have vaccine for all three strains P1, P2, P3. और bivalent है जहाँ पे सिर्फ 2 strains के लिए है, that is P1 and P3 के लिए. P2 के लिए क्यों नहीं कर रहा? Logically देखिए, if P2 is not there in the atmosphere as such and not there in as terms of wild strain, to make vaccines we have to have a culture जहाँ पे P2 का vaccine हमारे laboratories में grow हो रहा है. अगर wild strain है ही नहीं, it could become a problem that if there is a possibility कि चलो P2 का strain unfortunately leak हो गया atmosphere में, we might have P2 के wild cases where P2 is not there in the atmosphere anymore or not there in the wild anymore. तो ऐसे टाइम पे क्या करेंगे? ऐसे टाइम पे हमने बोला है कि P2 के जो भी laboratories हैं that have these strain, we will destroy these strains also, and we will continue on only with P1 and P3. So from a trivalent oral polio vaccine, we'll be going to a bivalent oral polio vaccine. Another thing happened that from 30th of November 2015, India started injecting immunization of polio program. So पहले polio का injection हुआ करता था, बाद में oral polio आ गए, and we had stopped injecting polio vaccines as such. तो अभी injectable polio vaccines भी हमने दोबारा चालू कर दिए हैं. So a child will get both oral polio vaccine and injectable polio vaccine also. People who are trained medical health workers, जैसे हमारे आशाs and ANMs, they will be taking care of injectable and oral polio vaccine for the children under our universal immunization program. Now the switch from trivalent oral polio vaccine to a bivalent oral polio vaccine happened in India on 25th of April 2016. So this particular date also is important. अच्छा, ये हम लोग बोलते हैं ना पल्स पोलियो. पल्स का फुल फॉर्म क्या है? पोस्ट रिससिटेशन एंड इनिशियल यूटिलिटी इन लाइफ सेविंग एफर्ट्स. ओके, मार्क दिस, मेक इट अ पॉइंट समवेयर. शायद कभी कभार एमपीएससी अगर जज्बाती हो गए तो पूछ सकते हैं. The third update for the week is Center of Excellence for Tribal Affairs. So 2 centers of excellence were set up for tribal affairs, and this was a collaboration between Ministry of Tribal Affairs and Art of Living. So हमारे यूनियन मिनिस्टर जो है श्री अर्जुन मुंडा, through a video conference set up this Center of Excellence for Tribal Affairs, and it was done by Art of Living. And Shri Ravi Shankar ji also graced us with his presence due to video conferencing. And these 2 सेंटर्स ऑफ एक्सीलेंस पर सेटअप। अब ये 2 सेंटर ऑफ एक्सीलेंस है क्या, ये देखते हैं और कहाँ पे है। सबसे पहला है औरंगाबाद में बनेगा, ठीक है। नाउ दिस इज गोइंग टू बी विद ट्राइबल अफेयर्स, दैट मीन दिस इज गोइंग टू बी फॉर ट्राइबल्स ओनली। इफ अ क्वेश्चन कम्स अप कि सेंटर्स ऑफ एक्सीलेंस फॉर ट्राइबल अफेयर्स स्टार्ट किया है, इट इज फॉर एससी, एसटी, ओबीसी, माइनॉरिटी, ये सब नहीं आएगा, सिर्फ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स के लिए। So what are we doing? Aurangabad मध्ये 10,000 farmers would be selected and they would be trained in sustainable agriculture and also organic farming. That means this is based on go adharit farming, that is cow based farming. और ये ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग यहाँ पे सिखाया जाएगा, आत्मनिर्भर ट्राइबल्स बनाएंगे हम लोग इनको, एंड दिस इज व्हाट द फर्स्ट सेंटर ऑफ एक्सेलेंस इज ट्राइंग टू डू. सो फर्स्ट वन इज इन औरंगाबाद इन महाराष्ट्र एंड द ट्रेनिंग फॉर 10,000 फार्मर्स बेस्ड ऑन काउ फार्मिंग, काउ बेस्ड फार्मिंग एंड ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग के ऊपर ये पूरी तरीके से हम लोग इसको स्ट्रेस करेंगे. सेकेंड इज गोइंग टू बी इन झारखंड. And this idea is to strengthen the Panchayati Raj institutions in 5 districts in 30 gram panchayats, which will be covering a total of 150 villages. By doing so, we will also be creating decent youth leaders in Jharkhand. So 2 centers of excellence, एक औरंगाबाद में जो 10,000 farmers के लिए होगा, जो sustainable farming सिखाएगा, organic farming on go आधारित basis. Second is in Jharkhand, which will be strengthening the Panchayati Raj institutions in 5 districts and 30 gram panchayats and 150 villages and all. And this is to create youth leaders as such. The last update is where we would be giving where the report has come in, which says electricity access in India and benchmarking distribution utilities. अब ये रिपोर्ट जो बनाई है ना, ये नीति आयोग ने बनाई है विद द हेल्प ऑफ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ पावर, रॉकफेलर फाउंडेशन एंड आल्सो स्मार्ट पावर इंडिया. ये चारों ने मिलकर ना एक सर्वे किया है, एंड दैट सर्वे दे ट्राई टू फाइंड आउट कि इंडिया का डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का जो है वो कितने और किस तरीके से है, व्हाट इज द परसेंटेज एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. So the report is named as Electricity Access in India and Benchmarking Distribution Utilities. What they did was they went to about 10 different states. Now the states that they selected had about 65% अपना total rural population है वो 10 states में रहता है, यानी बीमारू states पहले ले लिया, कभी बिहार लिया, उत्तर प्रदेश लिया, so on and so forth. तो ये 10 states ऐसे हमने पकड़ लिया, और ये 10 states में हमने जाके देखा कि किसके पास लाइट है, किसके पास नहीं है, कितनी दूर है लाइट घर से, इंडस्ट्रीज में लाइट किस तरीके से जाते हैं, कितने हाउस होल्ड्स के पास लाइट है और किस टाइप की लाइट है, यानी मीटर भी है या नहीं है, ये देखने के लिए हमने कोशिश की है. Now the sample size taken is 25,000 surveys done, which would be in various households and commercial enterprises and institutions as well. मतलब schools भी देख लिए, hospitals देख लिए, छोटे छोटे MSMEs देख लिए, cottage industries देख लिए, households भी देख लिए, and they did a total of 25 visitations, and then they came up with the final report stating that this is what we have found in the country at this point of time. Okay. So इनके की फाइंडिंग्स क्या है? सबसे पहले है 92% said that electricity is within 50 meters of their premises. कि yes, that हमारे आसपास इलेक्ट्रिसिटी है, हमारे घर में भी है या फिर आसपास है, ठीक है, 50 meters तक तो पक्का है. 87% have access to grid-based electricity. We have a national grid, out of which 87% said we are connected to it. So that is something that is happening. Electricity is available 17 hours a day on an average basis, and that is massive as compared to even 10 years ago. Now, I still understand 17 hours is far away from the 24/7 electricity that we're trying to provide for everybody, but 17 hours is at least a start. The next thing is 83% of household customers have electricity. 83% of household customers. This 87% on point number second and 83% on point number fourth are completely different numbers. 87% ने बोला है ग्रिड बेस्ड इलेक्ट्रिसिटी हमारे पास है. ये 87 के अंदर आपके स्कूल्स और हॉस्पिटल्स और MSMEs, कॉटेज इंडस्ट्री सब पकड़ के 87% बोल रहे हैं. जो आपने घर देखे वो घर जो है वो हाउसहोल्ड्स आउट ऑफ 100 83% are getting electricity, and 66% of total surveyed were satisfied with the electricity that they got, and 74% in urban areas were satisfied and 60% in rural areas were satisfied with the electricity. So there's still a long way to go when it comes to electricity, especially for 24/7 basis. But schemes like Pradhanmantri Sahaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana or even Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana have been doing really well when it comes to these numbers. And it is because of these two schemes that we have been able to meet such numbers. But going forward, it will be an uphill task, no doubt. But it should be done very soon, and that is our target. By 2022 is in fact when we are trying to meet all of these targets. hopefully we should be. All right, so those are the 4 updates, especially when it comes to the week from 26th of October to 1st of November. And this is our phone number. You can always drop in a message any point of time. I'll see you next week. All right, thank you for watching.